You're listening to Trek FM.
This is Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan, and you're listening to the 602 Club.
There was a little bar in Mill Valley where all the Starfleet trainees used to go.
The 602 Club.
You know it.
I was there more times than I can remember.
Welcome, everyone, to another supplemental episode of the 602 Club. I warned you it was going to be busy this month. We have so much that's happened geek-wise, and we're broadcasting live. Well, at least we're recording live from Kunlun, so I hope you can hear us. The portal seems to be open, I think. Daniel, does it look open to you? I don't know. I see a bird flying through.
Well, there's a lot of birds, and they just kind of fly around. They don't really do much. But, you know, the portal only stays open for an X amount of specified time, but it could close at any moment, I guess is my point. So we should probably,
Yeah, get to it. Yeah, we should get to it. Well, we're excited to be here. We're going to be talking about the latest season of the Marvel Netflix series that has just come out recently, Iron Fist, and I'm excited to do that. Before we do that, of course, you can find all the shows here on Trek FM at facebook.com/Trek FM. We're a feature provider there. Make sure you check us out. You can give us a star rating and review when you're there. And I just want to say a quick shout out to somebody who had actually gone and done that. And I think you're really going to enjoy this name, Daniel. But the latest reviewer is from Fishburp.
Oh, nice.
Which, what a great name. And they gave us 5 stars, and they said the podcast is wonderful. So thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Definitely helps us do... We've got 69 star ratings and reviews right now, and they're all 5 stars. So, wow. Thank you so much. It means a lot to us here at the network and to me personally. We're doing a review contest over on the Star Wars 602 Club special feed collection. That's its own feed, Star Wars the 602 Club collection. We're going to be giving away 2 copies of Rogue One. So if you would like to win one of those copies of Rogue One, it's just coming out soon, give us a star rating and review over there, and you'll be entered to win, which is fantastic. And you have 2 chances to win as well. So thank you so much to everybody who's already gone over there and done that. You can find us on Twitter at Trek FM, Facebook at facebook.com/Trek FM, and of course we have the listeners-only discussion group there on Facebook, which is at the Babel Conference. Just type Babel into the search field there on Facebook, and you'll find us. Or if you're at the website at trek.fm, just hit discussion on the menu bar, and it'll bring you over there. Now, Daniel, we have been watching all the Marvel shows. I mean, and this is the 4th one to have come out, and so... One, I wanted to ask you, because for me, it's always interesting coming into these. What was your familiarity with, Iron Fist in the first place? And what kind of ended up being your first impressions of this first season of this show?
So very little background history with Iron Fist. He's definitely probably one, I guess it's safe to say, at least one of the lesser known Marvel characters we've now gotten. Certainly as a standalone property at this point. Most of the other ones I knew fairly well. Iron Fist, I don't read the comics, but I follow the comics in ways. I like the movies, I play the games, so I've seen him around. I just wasn't exactly sure of his background and exactly what he was capable of doing. So I was also excited. I think I really researched him when they announced the Defenders, because I knew what Jessica Jones was about, I knew what Luke Cage was about, but Iron Fist was kind of more obscure. And then the early reviews started to come out of the show, and I was a little discouraged. This is why sometimes it's maybe better to stay away from the internet sometimes. But
yeah.
So the first episode, early impressions, I was like, okay, a little slow, but we'll see where it goes. And then, of course, I'm sure we'll talk about the rest as time goes on.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'm right there with you. I think anybody who's listened to the 602 Club at all, and if you haven't, I know what we know of Marvel from movies, really. And I've read some comics. Captain America is my favorite Marvel character, so I've read some of his comics. But on a whole, I'm not as familiar with the Marvel universe as I am DC. Even if it's like C and D level type characters. And so this is not one that I was overly familiar with. I'd heard the name Iron Fist, but I didn't really know the character. I didn't know where he was coming from. And for me, honestly, I found that kind of fun about this. I go in blind in that way. And, so what the show does or doesn't do is all on its own merit. I have no preconceptions or, thoughts about it other than, well, I've seen the other shows and I either liked or didn't like, but, each one kind of ends up standing on its own too. So for me, that's been a lot of fun. I'm right there with you in that started watching this. My wife and I watched the series together. She enjoys all of this stuff too. And even episode 6, I think, it was, you're absolutely right. The show's very slow in the beginning. It has a real slow ramp up. Luckily, I can say this: it doesn't do the thing that I felt like Jessica Jones does, where it crescendos in the middle and then just it's a downward slide to the end, where you're just like it feels uneven. This definitely continues to ramp up all the way to the very end. And a final climax of the whole season, which I like. I think it works better for a show when you do that. So
yeah, I would say if
this happens,
if the Netflix shows have one thing in common, it's pacing. It seems to be the thing they can't nail down. Like even the best of them have issues with that. I don't know, and I know I'm pretty sure that the Defenders is only a 10 episode order, so maybe they're kind of trying to fix that by going towards a little bit shorter of a season. Hopefully that'll help, because even the best of them have some issues with that. Maybe just cut off an episode or two and you might have it there.
Absolutely 100% agree with you that they've set it at that 13 episode mark, and I think you're 100% right that each one of these series has at least one episode where you're like, you could have diluted that into another episode and cut it down by an episode or two and really tightened up the series and made it better. And maybe that just has to do with when you're doing a whole series arc at one time, like they do. Maybe you just get a little too comfortable, like you don't feel as stretched, whereas like if you think of like episodic television, even in the serialized shows like on the DC or whatever, each episode has to do something to keep you invested, for the next week. Mm-hmm. Whereas this one, they're like, well, you're just binging it anyway. Yeah. So it just kind of feels like one long continuous thing instead of sometimes feeling that reward of watching that episode and being like, oh man, I can't wait to get to the next one. Sometimes you just feel like, what happened in that episode that was important, and so I absolutely agree with you there. And so this is, it's been an interesting process looking for this, and I'm glad to hear, I hadn't actually seen that, but I'm glad to hear that Defenders will only have 10 episodes. I think that could really help the series. So yeah, cool side note, did some research just on the show. Iron Fist had been in development with Marvel Studios since 2000. And originally they had hired Ray Park, Darth Maul himself, to star in the project. And it went through multiple directors and ultimately, didn't go anywhere. But my thought process is, dang, that would have been cool to have him really get to play this role and show off those skills that he has as a martial artist. I think that would have been fantastic.
Do you think he would have pulled off the frosted curly tips as well? I don't know if he could do it. The martial arts, certainly.
That is a fantastic question. I don't know if Finn Jones even pulls off the frosted curly. Does anybody?
It's funny. My roommate, I was watching the show and he comes in and he goes, What is this? Is this guy from the 90s? What is going on here? And I'm like,
yes.
I mean, he technically is kind of,
It's like a Backstreet Boy reject.
Yeah, it's funny.
Oh my gosh, that is a great. Oh, I love that. That's a great observation.
Oh, by the way, and I looked it up too. It's actually 8 episodes. The Defenders is only going to be 8 episodes long, so
there we go.
Should hopefully even have less problems with that kind of stuff. But anyways.
Man, that's good news. That's good news. That means that what you need to do is every single moment that you spend on screen needs to be doing something important. And honestly, I think, that's the strength of when you do a series like this, when you have a limited run, is that usually that's what helps. But it's always frustrated me that these Netflix Marvel shows seem to not use that strength and create an actual weakness because they just add too much. And it's like, maybe instead of always setting a specific episode, guideline for each series, you should just write the number of episodes you need to tell whatever story it is you need to tell. So that could be 6 for one series. It could be 8 for another series. Maybe it is 13 for another series. But don't limit yourself. Just make sure that you tell the story you need to tell. Does that make sense? Do you think that would work at all?
Well, I think it would, especially for the Netflix model. I mean, they're not beholden to anybody. They have these properties that they can do. Like, obviously, Defenders is doing that. They're taking it and they're like, no, we don't have enough for 13. Let's do what we have. And maybe, I don't know, it's probably more expensive getting all those people in there at the same time. But I'm sure budget is also a concern. But still, it is nice to see that they're kind of taking that to heart. We're 4 series in now, and it's not always exactly the same problem, but it is this pacing issue that they consistently have. So maybe they're learning from it, and they're trying to help grow these shows, which is great.
You really think the rat? I mean, Mickey is having problems coughing up the dough. I mean, come on, come on. The mouse has plenty of money.
Yeah,
but
true.
no, I'm sure that it is got to do something with that, because when you do have that many stars together, the time and the money it takes to have all of those people together at one time probably does cost a lot more. And you're right, whatever it is they're going to be facing and the budget and everything for that, it's got to be astronomically bigger than any one of these shows together. So, yeah, I think that probably has something to do with it. But hopefully,
I hope, too, that they go all out with it, like you're saying, like 8 huge, big, important episodes. Mm-hmm. Every episode is something that matters and has cool fights and these awesome sequences and stuff. And I know they can do it. They've obviously done it, piecemeal between the shows. I think they can do it.
Right. I mean, this basically just needs to be the Avengers as a series.
Essentially.
I mean, yeah, that's what we're asking for. Right. So, one of the most interesting things about this series for me was the characters. And as it is with, I think, all of these Marvel series, it lives or dies by how you like the characters, especially when you're investing, 13 solid hours of watching these shows. And, any show is like that, but I think specifically when you kind of sit down and this whole binge culture that we have now, if you're not really invested in those characters, it gets harder and harder to, let Netflix continue on to the next episode instead of being like, yeah, you know what, I'll just come back to that later. And so I really wanted to focus on them and kind of dive into them, because this is, for me, and I'll just be straight up, for the most part, I kind of found the characters bland and kind of boring and not real engaging for me. And specifically, I'm pinning that on Finn Jones as Davy Rand. I think he's miscast as this billionaire Buddhist monk that, finds his way home.
I've heard this criticism, and I don't even disagree with it. To me, it feels more like a writing failure, but I guess it could be an acting failure. I don't know. I don't like Danny Rand.
Well, and it could be both. Actually,
it could be a combination of the both. Yeah. Absolutely. I don't like Danny Rand. I get it. He's troubled and he's had this traumatic past and stuff, but he's whiny and angry and complaining. I don't know. There's just not a lot redeeming about him.
So you're saying he's millennial?
I would not say that, but I know some people would, and that's fine. I don't know.
What's funny is we have the millennial on one side and we have the Gen Xer on the other side. So on the podcast tonight.
Yeah. So I get it. I don't. There was never like a particular moment or a time or a conversation I'm like, man, this guy just can't act. I felt he portrayed what he was given consistently, but again, I can't really qualify that. I don't know. He's too wishy-washy. He never knows what he wants. He's just a poorly written character especially when we've had, Daredevil, which was fantastic. And even both Luke and Jessica were also super strong leads of those shows. And then you kind of had this milquetoast, weak sauce kind of, guy that just flounders around for 12 episodes, punching things essentially, I don't know whether to blame Finn or to blame the writing or both, like you say, but there is definitely something missing there, something that they had before that they've had in the past that they don't have now.
Yeah, I mean, as John Mayer would say, there is something that's missing here, and I don't know what it is to fix it, but it's definitely just not there with the character. And I think one of the things, and you kind of hit on something, he's a character who, let me put it this way. Okay, I've heard on other podcasts somebody say that Superman is kind of a dumb character who only tries to solve things with punching, which is completely untrue.
Right.
But I do feel like that's exactly who Danny Rand is. Yeah. Like, he has no other recourse other than to go punch something. Because one, that's his only superpower, is a really strong punch. But two, it's like he doesn't have the intellectual capability to do anything else. Like, he has a hard time speaking to anyone and explaining himself, which is annoying. Especially at the very beginning, where all I was yelling at the TV for 3 episodes was just tell them something that only you would know, that they would know. Mm-hmm. It was like, how dumb are you? Just say the thing that only you two would know, like the inside joke. Freaking grew up together. It's like, but he didn't have the intellectual capability to do that. Or, again, I think you're absolutely right. It could just be, it feels like they drag out the writing and the pacing there, so it becomes this really frustrating thing.
There was this line, I think it was the last episode, or the second to last episode, where Claire Temple, who, thank God she's everywhere in this universe, she says, Danny, you just can't, there's just some things you can't punch, man.
Yes.
You stop it. And the problem that I have with the character, half the time we're kind of taught he actually specifically states, I lived in this monastery, worked, and learned and studied for a decade or more, and I have complete emotional control. And he has more emotional outbursts than any character that I could think of off the top of my head. This man,
a 5-year-old.
He is, yeah. And actually, in one of the episodes, Madame
Kung
Gauss,
Fu temper tantrums.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. That's exactly right. And Madame Gauss says that to him. She's like, "You're such a child, man. What are you doing?" And I guess it's part of his. The thing is, I can excuse it in my mind if I do mental gymnastics, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. He's, his parents died when he was young, but you shouldn't have to do that. The writing should speak for itself. And when you're confused by it and it's not written properly, you come across as this obnoxious, underdeveloped little kid character, and it's really hard to get behind that.
Well, and what's so interesting about it, and I think what hurts him as a character is that we've had characters like this before. Look, Danny Rand is basically Batman and Arrow put together, and what's unfortunate for him as a character is that both of those characters are exponentially better than he is and much more interesting. And I think about how Batman is able to deal with his parents' death and galvanize that into controlling his hatred and his fear and his rage and pouring that into what he becomes as Batman. That makes sense, right? Danny has spent his entire life, basically living in a monastery with monks, and it's a weird thing, kind of being tortured, half tortured, but turned basically into this monk warrior Iron Fist. But yet, you're absolutely right. He has no control over his emotions or anything else, and it's like he's a really bad Jedi. He just, he pressed all his emotions down, but he never found a way to have any kind of. And it's just he becomes this explosive, selfish, self-indulgent character who, becomes this Iron Fist, then selfishly leaves Kunlun open to attack to go home for some unknown reason because he's decided he doesn't want to be the Iron Fist anymore. Or, they never really explained that. And what could have been a really great story of, right now in season 3 of Flash made a huge mistake of trying to change time and created Flashpoint, right? And they're using this whole storyline to talk about how a hero recovers from making just an absorbently ridiculous, awful mistake, right? But this character, it's not written well enough to where you truly understand that kind of point of view or feel like there's that kind of arc. It just feels very juvenile instead of kind of an adult exploration of coming to terms with being an adult, taking responsibility for your actions, and none of that. Like, none of that's here, I don't feel like, in the character of Danny Rand. And part of that is that every time he, like, gets into his ragey place, or something, I didn't feel like Finn Jones played it it just kind of came off as like, to me. And that's where it felt like the acting just wasn't living up. And it's like, I feel like if he had had a better actor, and I don't know who could have done this, and again, this has nothing to do with, what had been complained about with, are they whitewashing the character or anything, even though the character's white in the comics? Just find the best actor to portray the emotional turmoil that you have here, and I don't think he was able to do that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the thing is, his motivation is never clear, and I guess...
Yes, exactly.
It's like a good, I don't know, mid-third of the series is like, if not more than that, 2/3 of the series is like him trying to, well, you are the Iron Fist, and you're supposed to be defeating the Hand, and then he's like, no, I'm Danny Rand, or am I the Iron Fist? And like in a good context and proper writing, that could be a really interesting kind of
yes.
Back and forth, and even like the final moment in the final battle half works for me. It doesn't completely hit the nail on the head because the setup isn't done properly.
Right.
But I'm like, okay, now I get it. Now he gets it. But the leading up to that and everything else is just like, I don't know what is he supposed to be doing? He's just getting mad at everybody and then like yelling about not being this or having trouble. I don't know. What is the whole point of this story? I just didn't understand it for a good chunk of the show.
I think you're absolutely correct to call that out, because understanding character motivation is so important to plugging into a character and to the story. And I think you're absolutely right. There's this frustration with understanding the motivations of a lot of the characters in the storyline, and it never feels sufficiently explained on a lot of different levels. And it felt more like they just kind of threw it at you and it's like, oh, you remember the Hand and, all this stuff. Okay, yeah, I mean, I remember the Hand from then, but, how it all connects and why everybody is doing what they're doing is so important to really get across on screen. And I don't feel like, look, I don't need things spoon-fed to me. I can intuit, right? But for majority of this, I couldn't really intuit anything that Danny Rand was supposed to be doing or what he was supposed to be doing or what his calling was, or, I mean, none of that felt clear. And yes, I think it makes it for an absolutely frustrating experience watching this show because, I mean, I think you probably have the bones here of something that's really interesting, especially when you're thinking of that dichotomy. Who am I? What am I? Am I the Iron Fist? Am I Danny Rand? Or am I both? It's the same thing that like Superman has to deal with Clark Kent and Superman, or Batman and Bruce Wayne, or Arrow and Oliver Queen. And specifically, they've been doing this big time this season for the 5th season of Arrow, as they kind of wrap up the whole island and being away, flashbacks, and they're really dealing with like who is this character, and they've been kind of slowly doing that the whole series. You could have done that here and made it for a really interesting topic, I think, but you just don't, and that's frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I like at the end the idea. I mean, I think the idea is like he's going to forge his own version of the Iron Fist, like become his, you can do both. And like, I think, but I'm not even sure that was the intention of the writing or the point of the story. So I'm even after just finishing it, it's like, okay, all right. So what was the lesson supposed to be learned? What was the point? And then of course the ending, which I'm sure we'll touch on later, leaves a whole nother set of questions as well. So But
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, I do have to say, character-wise, somebody that I felt very invested in, I really enjoyed her story. At the beginning, it was a little unclear, but I felt like she had a much more interesting storyline to walk through, and that was Colleen Wing and Jessica Henwick. And one, she's fantastic.
Yeah,
she's a great actress, and I felt really plugged into her character, really enjoyed watching her on screen. She's very good at the fight scenes that they have her do, and I could never tell when it was her or maybe a stunt double. I thought she was just wonderful. And I had so much more fun watching her storyline than I ever did Danny's, honestly.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's definitely one of the highlights of the show. And I don't know, and I assume maybe you don't either at this point, but I don't know her comic history or what's going on with her, but I certainly hope that obviously we'll get a little bit more of her, but I hope that we get a lot more of her because she's tremendously more interesting than Danny. And honestly, if they were true to that character, I don't know that she'd put up with this nonsense all the time, but yeah, she's great. I really liked her.
Yeah. And I kind of get that they're two somewhat emotionally damaged people in a lot of ways that are finding a way to understand one another, and I personally in my life, and I think anybody can attest to, especially when you have somebody in a romantic sense that you feel like understands you in a way that maybe other people don't, there is that connection, and there's more forgiveness there because you can understand the reasons of why somebody would be doing something, and it's not that they mean to, it's just because they necessarily can't help it, and you kind of get that. And so I understand that that's what they're going for in this relationship, and I think that's fine. It is just frustrating to me that her character arc and what she's going through is so much stronger and much more well laid out than Danny's, the main character. And so that whenever she was on screen, I was like, okay, I want to keep watching this. And when she wasn't on screen, I was never as invested. And so hopefully, if they continue this series and they do this Iron Fist season 2, I would want them to write Danny as well as they wrote Colleen.
Yeah.
So, and Jessica Henwick is just fantastic. She was in The Force Awakens actually too, as one of the pilots, and
she was in something else nerdy. I can't remember what, but it's not really important. Yeah, no,
yeah, she's just what, and what I think that she brings is kind of a vitality to this series, which is really helpful. She's in Game of Thrones. That's the other thing that you're thinking of. But yeah, she just really does. She brings something where I think what she does is she makes something in this relatable, right? Because, like, let's talk about the Meachum kids. Both of those characters are really boring to me.
Oh, really? Oh, that's interesting.
I was not interested. Yeah, I was not interested in them personally at all. Now, let me preface by saying I thought it was interesting that Ward became the character that made the turn towards Danny, and then Joy becomes the character who makes the turn, so they do that reversal. That was semi-interesting, but I don't feel like they really gave... Let me put it this way. Joy definitely gets the short end of the stick, because by the end of the season, and she makes that major turn, spoiler alert here,
crazy.
I was like, that came out of nowhere.
Yep.
That, like, what are you doing? That doesn't make any sense. You haven't given us any indication that that's who this character is. Now, I could see her in the next season going that way,
right? But
to say at the end of the series that she's already made that turn, no, you haven't set that up. That's awful writing.
It was terrible. It was literally the worst part about this show, with hands down. Like, the craziest, like, she hadn't even shown an ounce of anger towards Danny about, like, this situation at all, like blaming him or anything like that.
They hadn't even been on screen that much together at that point.
Like 4 episodes or something like that. Yeah. I was like astonished. I'm like, because sitting across from her is a character that we don't get a lot of, but has an arc that makes sense. Like, that he goes to this place and wants to eliminate Danny, and then she's just like, yeah, I'm in. What? You are? Why are you all of a sudden in? You just like left the whole situation because your father turned on him. Like, why are you all of a sudden now? Whatever. I was very upset about that. I thought it was totally undeserved. You're absolutely right. They could do that in the next season and it would make sense and that would be fine. But where she was, no indication at all. No indication.
No. And I mean, and that's what was frustrating because, at least for Ward, I think he becomes a little bit more interesting of a character, especially the moment he goes, full on Dexter with his dad, and goes through that whole experience. Like they just give him more so you understand where he's going and why. Look, Joy could get to that point. You just needed to give me that indication throughout the series that that's what was going to happen and write it in a way that makes sense. You feel like where Ward ends up makes sense. Where Joy ends up, you're just like, okay,
yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Absolutely. But I will say this, and this is why I was surprised to hear you say that. I think Ward's journey in this season is one of the more interesting characters that I've seen, not just on Netflix Marvel, but in recent history. I really, really enjoyed his character, what he went through, because it's, to me, the grayest of grayscales. His arc kind of weaves between, is he a good guy, is he not? Do you root for him or do you not? I mean, like you said, he literally straight up kills his dad.
Yeah.
And at the end, you're still not sure. Like next season, like if I said, Matthew, tell me what you think is going to happen with that character next season. I don't know. It could.
It's wide open.
It could go in either direction, like this, and it's really interesting for me that like he's done some terribly awful things and he's done some really decent things, and like to me, I still want to root for him. I want to see him become a better person. I want to, when they had the shot of his portrait on the wall with Danny's portrait on the wall, I'm like, that's cool.
Yep.
And I hope that I know writers tend to, I kind of feel like writers tend to do the whole history repeats itself thing. So I think it's more likely that maybe he'll become a bad guy. I would be way more interested in seeing him as a good guy, trying to deal with himself and the problems that he has. I was in the beginning, I thought he was kind of dull, but as soon as the stuff started ramping up, man, he is my favorite character on that show by far.
I think you have a really good point, and I tend to agree with you that he becomes somebody who's more interesting. I think what was frustrating is at the beginning and where the kind of boredom with them came is that they were not writing them dynamically enough when they were having their scenes together, that I was just kind of bored, basically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, and it didn't help that, for Joy, she continued to kind of be like that for the most part. She had, I liked that she started to have this way of finding herself, and realizing, what she was good at and all that kind of stuff. That stuff was kind of interesting, but it was the end that just kind of ruins it for me.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right with him. He is a character that you're like, I kind of want to root for him for the next season. Like, I want him to, like, find a way out of the mire and the muck that he had found, like, literally found himself in, dumping his dead dad,
Yeah,
or
that's true.
supposed dead dad. Yeah, literally in the swamp, I want to drain the swamp with Ward Meachum, okay?
and the thing is, too, is, like, he's so relatable, too, because this is a man who has endured years and years of abuse at the hands of his father. And
you're absolutely right.
Sympathize with that. You're like, man, like, yeah, he screwed up, but it's not really all his fault. And of course you have decisions to make. And that's where the struggle is, and the interesting characteristics come to play. Like, he makes poor decisions all the time. And then he'll go and he'll do something like he gets it, but he's just stuck in it and he can't get out. And it's like, yes.
This just came to mind that Ward and Danny both have the same thing, and it's this kind of like overlording father figure controlling what they do and trying to find a way to break out of that. So it's like a massive 13-episode arc of daddy issues.
Yeah, that's true.
Because, Danny has the monks, of Kunlun doing that fatherly, like, this is who you are, this is what you will be. And, Ward has had that same exact thing with his, supposed dead dad in his ear telling him what to do all of his life. And they've each had this same experience, and they're having to break out of that to find out who they actually are for themselves. I think they do that so much more successfully with Ward than they do Danny, because they never they never give you and this is where I think with Danny you would have really been helped. If the show had started with Danny and Kunlun, so you had any care about Kunlun and his experience there, that it would mean something that he had left. Because at the end of the series, again, spoiler alert, if you're listening to this, I don't know why you are if you haven't watched the show, but, you get that whole thing where it's been destroyed and you're like, okay, so why do I really care? Nobody's told me why I should care about Kunlun. So if you had just started the show in a lot of the ways where Arrow started with him on the island, and we're telling those stories side by side, like, honestly, just Jack Arrow's storytelling structure, I think it would have made for a much better show, because I would have then at least cared about what happens and what's going on, and I think I would have had a much better understanding of Danny Rand as a character, where I get that with Ward Meachum.
Yeah, totally. And the thing is, too, I think it's probably way easier to do it. Like you said, if you actually showed it, of course, you're going to get that kind of urge to care about it. But with Ward, you have a personification. You have that actual figure. Yep. And with Danny, it's all, he's already nebulous enough and all this stuff. And it's like, it's not helping the character that you have this person with confused motivations, and then you don't really show why one side is confused. It seems quite simple to us what he should be doing a lot of the times, and then he just goes and punches things again, and you're like, you just keep messing it up, Danny. Stop doing that.
Yes. Yes. Well, and just think about this. Okay, so Davos, that's a character to which we would have had much more connection with as well if we'd had some backstory. But he just kind of comes in like mid-season, and we're not giving enough background structure or understanding for me to truly care about him. Like, and his character arc is that, because of that, so kind of blasé, classic, like, oh, I've been betrayed by the person who was supposed to be my friend that I'm really jealous of, and I was just like, blah, 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 blah. Like, how many times have we seen this, especially even in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where this kind of thing has happened? You needed to make him a fully realized character, and not one that's flat. There's no dynamicism to Davos. And that's frustrating, I think, because if you had given us the backstory, he would have been a dynamic character. And I think lended more credibility to that part of the story and made it, you feel something, like you would have then felt his pain more so.
Right.
Otherwise, I think, especially as somebody who doesn't know the comics or anything like that, I'm just having to intuit what they tell me in the story, and there's just not quite enough for that character.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I liked the Davos character. He was flat, for sure. And I think he would have been served if they had thrown him in a few episodes earlier.
Yes.
So we got that connection. But he serves the point in the story, and I think essentially he's probably more of a setup for future things going on than anything else. Yeah, you get anger and then really angry from him, and that's pretty much it. So, he keeps saying that they're brothers, but like you say, we've never seen that. So, okay, I mean, it's nice that you tell us that, but it would be better if you just showed it, and then we wouldn't have to, go through all of this.
Always show, don't tell.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it works in film. So, and I felt kind of the same way with Bakuto.
Yeah.
He just does his thing, but I don't find him generally all that interesting.
He's disarming. Obviously he's the guy that comes across as the good guy first, and then clearly has ulterior motivations. I'm actually more interested in, did he live? And if he did or if he didn't, it doesn't really matter. What is his relationship with Madame Gao? Because I feel like she has been behind the whole thing. And it's never shown that way, but I'm curious about what that fallout would be, because he seems much more pawnish than anything else. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to see in the future. But nothing grabbed me about his character. Yeah, there was nothing really exciting going on there.
No, I agree with you too. I like, and this is a both and. I really like that Claire Temple is in the story, but then I don't at the same point, because there is a point to which, like, she helps out for a while, but then I feel like they just kind of lose her and why she's really there. Like, and so it for me, like, I love Rosario Dawson and I love the character of Claire Temple. I think she's one of the better characters in all of these Marvel, Netflix shows. But I felt like they tried to put her in maybe too much of the show. And I was talking about this with friend of the show, John Mills, and he was saying, when she beats up Madame Gao's guys,
yeah, that was ridiculous.
Really takes away like how cool and good, like, well, her people should be, and the fact that the Iron Fist can beat them up too. Like, what?
I like what they did at the end, that they showed her being trained and stuff, so that maybe, in the future she could potentially defend herself against, stuff, which is cool. I like that. I agree. There actually are a couple points in this story that they have real problems with that. Like you just mentioned, the fact that she had that was like the first time at the dojo, and she had or the second time or whatever, and she had just practiced a few things. And now she can beat up these supposedly trained, awesome assassin ninja people. No, I don't.
But she has those Wolverine claws on her hands,
yeah.
I mean, come on.
I don't buy it. If she tricked one into something, it would be fine, but she was hand-to-hand combatant with this person, and I don't know. They do this a lot in shows. It's like they don't ever respect the scale of skill that these characters are supposed to have. Even at the end battle, when it was if your main character, antagonist is a boardroom billionaire business guy, just showing him, boxing against a boxing bag once isn't going to make me think that he can now outpunch the Iron Fist, quote unquote the Iron Fist, because we're told how great Danny Rand is. I don't understand why this devolves into a fist fight when it's very clear. This is why Superman never fights Lex Luthor hand to hand, right? Because it would be stupid. It would make no sense.
Unless he's in his battle
Unless he's in a
armor
battle suit, and then that makes sense. No, you just don't have. So they do this all the time, and I hate when they do that. But that's
it's why the Joker and Batman never go fisticuffs.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't.
That.
It's not. You're absolutely right. No, I think you're 100% right, and I think it leads me to David Wenham, who I've loved since he was in Lord of the Rings. He's been in so many other things. He plays Faramir in Lord of the Rings, if you're wondering. But with Harold Meachum, I mean, he's interesting somewhat, but the problem is he's also a big cliche as a villain, and I think he relishes in playing that mustache twirlingness to him, but he's a little bit too mustache twirling to be interesting, if you ask me.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think he was generally scary sometimes. I think he can pull that off pretty well.
Oh, no, I completely agree. I mean, there are times where you're like, this guy is kind of just pure evil, and he enjoys it.
Yeah. The character of Harold Meachum, the thing that they keep doing this too, and you already mentioned, they've done it in Arrow. Batman has versions of it too, where you're connecting events with today, so intertwining it with what happened years and years and years ago. I don't know. I get it, but like you say, it's just a cliche. Of course, he's gonna come back and whatever.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. The whole thing that they're his evilness, I guess, goes all the way back to when him and Danny's father first started the company, and they're standing on top of the building, and he's like, I thought maybe if I threw him over the edge, and you're like, really? Okay, I guess maybe you're just legitimately a psychopath, and that's what you're trying to say. But if you're just a psychopath, you're even less interesting as a psychopath than the Joker is, as a character. You're just what you're doing is you're creating a character who, again, is not dynamic. He's flat because he only has one modus operandi, which is to be evil.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
you never give me any kind of understanding. Like, I never feel like he really loves his kids. I feel like it's always a lie. You know, I feel like he kind of is the Ducat of this. You know, like, he doesn't really love his kids.
Right.
He just he tells people what they want to hear so that he can get what he wants from them. And so, yeah, it's definitely a frustration for me for the show. And it becomes kind of one of those things where it's like, it's another Marvel villain that's just not all that interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. The show has like 3 separate villains, and none of them are the main villain. Like, Harold is villainous and does villainy things, but isn't the main threat until the last episode, which also felt kind of flat to me. Like, okay, now we know he killed your parents, but there's still this whole other group of people. I mean, I guess they feel screwed now, but they keep moving the goalpost, you know? You know, first it's Gao, and then it's Bakuto, and now it's Meachum. But it's not like Meachum was behind it the whole time or anything like that. It just feels like, again, Danny Rand just goes in and punches whatever he feels is responsible for his problems at the moment. And, you know, not having a compelling thing to punch, I guess, is a pretty big problem for the show.
Yeah. Exactly. You need a compelling reason to punch. Well, and I think that brings us kind of just the whole plot and premise of the show. And we've mentioned it here. You know, Danny Rand returns to New York after being gone and presumed dead for 15 years. And, well, there's already been on a show on the air for 5 years now called Arrow, where a character was supposedly dead and then came back. And so this feels very familiar, and I don't necessarily think that this show is as successful in making me care about the main character, but also specifically making me understand his motivations as a character, as even Arrow was in its first season, for diving into, you know, why Oliver returned and who he is and his struggles and everything, and making that truly, really interesting, and like helping me root for the guy who isn't really always the hero, because Danny's not always the hero, right? Because he's what we learned from the end of this series here, this first season, is that Danny's made a huge mistake, Michael. I mean, and that huge mistake is that he did leave Kunlun, and that leaving destroyed something that's obviously important. Now, I don't know what that is or why it's important, because they never told me in the show. But what I get is that he made a huge mistake. And maybe if he had done this a different way, like leaving Kunlun when the gate wasn't open,
yeah,
you know, leaving as it's about to close and not putting it at risk, he could have come back and done all this. But he has made a huge mistake. But I don't feel like that they ever truly live up to the premise of the show, and really, it doesn't feel as fleshed out as it needs to be for me to be fully invested in what's happening.
Yeah, I'm with you. Kunlun doesn't seem to matter that much.
Until it does.
Until it does, right. And then, of course, I don't think it's destroyed, because it's just not there. It's gone. So I don't know if they used a Shrinko ray or they teleported it somewhere, or who knows. You know what? Maybe it's in that big hole in the ground that we saw at the end of Daredevil season 2.
Oh, maybe. Maybe that's where they were trying to get. It was the tunnel to Kunlun instead of, you know, like, I don't know.
It seems
it's in another dimension, though, I thought. So I don't know.
I don't know.
That's the other thing. Like, I don't really understand what it is or where it is or why it is or any of that. All I kind of heard is that it's something like heaven, but apparently not really heaven, because Danny Rand got the hell beat out of him and made into the Iron Fist. I don't know if that's not what I think of as heaven. What about you, Daniel? I mean,
well, it's very pretty, apparently, and there are young martial arts mistresses that bathe sometimes, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I'm just
kidding. I mean, that's what we've
like,
heard from.
That's literally the only description that we're given of Kunlun. So I don't know. I don't know. I agree with you. Like, a lot of it too feels like setup and kind of carry on forward with what we've seen before already, like this hand stuff. Obviously, Madame Gao is a returning character, and the whole drug stuff and all of that is being carried over, which is cool. I like that. But again, we're dealing with the Iron Fist right now, and what did he accomplish, and was it worth it, or whatever? I guess we'll see, but it seems unlikely to me. Like you said, he seems to have made a huge mistake and screwed over a whole bunch of people just to come home for a reason he didn't even know he had. And I don't know. Again, it's the writing is so unclear on a lot of this stuff that it is frustrating. It's not like you're frustrated the whole time, but like you're just like, where are we going with this? What's the direction we're headed?
And when you think about it too, and what we talked about at the beginning with the pacing and everything, look, you have 13 episodes to disseminate this information. And there are episodes where it really felt like you could have shortened things up, tightened things up, or excised altogether and done something else. This is where I think like flashback episodes might have helped or something. Or just start the season in that flashback time so that, you know, you could move forward and give us some more information about why and what's important and who these main players are, especially with, you know, the Kunlun aspect and everything. And none of that really happens. And then, you know, there are some interesting things throughout the series, and all these series have these things too. But, you know, one of the things was, I heard John Mills talking about this on another show, the idea of, you know, you have the aspect of people that are thrown into, you know, mental institutions and seen as crazy, even though they're not. You know, that's an interesting aspect, and I think there's something kind of interesting they're trying to say there, but it never really comes to fruition. I don't think they truly flesh that out enough. You know, there's the whole idea about how, and they talked about this. I was just reading up on the show. You know, they were talking about this whole idea of Jeff Loeb was saying how that you know, you have this whole 1% of people, right, that control so much, and how their actions impact, like whether or not it's, you know, this whole epidemic of the heroin they introduce and all that kind of stuff. But again, that you could read that in there, but it's never done well enough to actually make any kind of good commentary, I think. And so it's just like, I think the whole plot and premise of the show, what I end up with is kind of a blasé comic book show, because it never is transcending the material. It's never really challenging me, because nothing is really above kind of most of the cliches that we get kind of all tied up together in a thing called the Iron Fist. Yeah. I mean, I agree completely. It's just, there's, and I feel like we've been kind of harsh. It's not the best, and there are serious problems with it. It's not unenjoyable though. It gets long in the tooth, and we'll get into some of the positives of it. But yeah, it is a frustrating thing when you feel like I'm in 6 episodes into this show. What is going on? Like, where's this going? Yep. What is going to happen? Because it just seems okay. Now we're doing an episode, you know, in a mental institution, and now we're doing a cage fight episode, and now we're, you know, it's like, I don't understand what this has to do with any of the stuff that I'm supposed to care about, and it's just sometimes it can get frustrating. Yeah, you're absolutely right, and a lot of those things never fully tie in as well as they should have, and so you're right. Talking about fight scenes and cage fighting, how did you think the fight scenes lived up to what we've seen before? Because we've had some pretty ridiculously sweet things happen in this in these Marvel shows. You know, when it comes to fight scenes, you know, I think of the Daredevil hallway scene, things like that happen, and you're just like, oh my gosh, that was incredible work. Did anything here for you in Iron Fist kind of live up, or you're just like, oh my god, when it happened? Here's my thing about it. There wasn't enough Iron Fisting. Now saying that out loud, I realize that's probably not the best way to phrase it. Let me redo that. That sounds like a different show. Yeah. Let me try to say it this way. He was not the Iron Fist enough. Like, if your thing is that you can become this immortal weapon and your fist becomes indestructible and you can punch through all sorts of things. I mean, it only happens a half a dozen times throughout the whole show.
And then, of course, they do this cliche thing. They do the Spider-Man 2 thing where, you don't feel like the Iron Fist, so you're not the Iron Fist, and like every other.
So you're just impotent.
Yeah, exactly. So every other episode feels like he can't do his thing, and that's so frustrating because that's his thing, man. Like, let him do it. I don't know, but to answer your question, there are some cool action set pieces here. I think I still got to say that Daredevil 1, I think season 1 holds the top spot as far as action's concerned. Like you mentioned, there's good stuff in Luke Cage and Jessica Jones, but those characters don't really have finesse in the same way that Daredevil and Iron Fist are supposed to.
Right.
So it's more just like punching through things and throwing big heavy things and stuff like that. There's some good choreography in here. There's some really good fight scenes. Like you mentioned Colleen in the cage fight, and that's good stuff. That's really cool.
A lot of her fight scenes are actually the best in this show.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And there's a lot of mixed stuff as well. There's there's weapon fights and stuff like that, sword battles, and they do mix it up, And really at the end is the first time that they really kind of acknowledge that their guns are a thing. So maybe we should worry about that, which was kind of funny to me. Can't punch a gun. Yeah, I guess not. But apparently you can block
he can block one with his hand, with his fist.
Yeah, which also seems...
He's like Wonder Woman without the bracelets, apparently. But only with one hand, because the other hand doesn't light up.
Yeah, what?
Why doesn't that happen? I don't understand.
I don't know either.
Why have to fight with one hand behind your back?
Because he's not Iron Fists. That's the next one. So.
It just didn't sound right on the title. Iron Fists.
Yeah, again, I do wish there was more of that going on, because there are cool sequences with it, like when he does it, and it's this is specifically I'm thinking of the last episode when he punches like basically a whole floor out of that was a Manhattan
cool.
tower, and that was awesome. And it's been seen in the trailer, so it's not anything anybody hasn't seen. But
yeah, he doesn't need Thor's hammer. I mean, he's got his fist.
Oh, you know what? That's interesting. I wonder what would happen
if he hit it with his fist.
If he punched Mjolnir, or if he punched Captain America's shield, would the same effect happen from the first Avengers film?
Oh yeah, where it just kind of blow him backwards because no, that's actually great.
Yeah, let's see it. Let's make it happen, Marvel. We need to see some crossover between the TV.
Yes, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
That would be totally awesome. My favorite fight scene is the one with Bakuto and Colleen in the park at night when it's raining. That sword fight was wonderful. And when he breaks her sword and she kicks the sword into his leg, I was like, holy shnikes, that's awesome. Like, that was the best move in the whole thing because it was so unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it really surprised me. And so, honestly, I felt like her fight scenes were the best. I actually thought, though, what was interesting to watch was the drunken fight scene match between him and the Drunken Master.
Mm-hmm.
That was one where it was like, Danny has this fight style where it's so much more about using the other person's momentum against them, which is not flashy or showy, so it's not quite as dynamic to watch. But that was a place where him learning to be able to use the unexpected nature against the Drunken Master was pretty sweet. When he kicks, I think does he kick back or he throws back the bottle at his face? Yeah, it was just awesome. So yeah, that was there were some good things here and some good choreography. I just, for being this ultimate fighter, I didn't feel like he got to show off enough of his Ultimate Fighting Championship moves.
Yeah, I agree. He gets beat up a lot. And, he's not invulnerable. He's not supposed to be. But he is supposed to be the best. And sometimes he gets to show it off, but it doesn't happen enough. And then, of course, he gets to unleash this weapon when the need calls for it. And again, he spends most of the show complaining about how it's not working right or whatever. He hasn't changed the light bulb in his fist or whatever.
Apparently he needs to check his batteries or something.
Yeah, seriously, man. But
battery chi, man. It's hard to get those batteries in New York.
I'm wondering, in the inevitable first meeting of the Defenders, when Iron Fist punches Luke Cage, I'm kind of curious what's going to happen. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, well, Luke Cage is not invulnerable because, those bullets that have that explosive power can get through his skin. So is the Iron Fist the same amount of power, which it looks like it? I mean, it can burst through, a lot of things, solid steel door.
Yeah.
We'll see. Yeah. What did you think? This was interesting to me too. I really haven't paid too much attention to this in most of the shows. I think in Luke Cage it was actually the most noticeable because they used a lot of like the music of Harlem, whether it was jazz or hip hop or anything like that, to really create the sound of the show, which I thought worked so well. But this show, they go with this Tron Legacy like electronic sound. What did you think of that? Did it work for you for the show? Because for me, I felt that it didn't fit the nature of the show, and where you could have made this feel like, basically it didn't fit with, this is a kung fu show.
Right.
So why don't we kind of make it feel like a kung fu movie or something and allow the music to kind of reflect that? I don't know. I didn't respond as well. I mean, Tron Legacy's music is wonderful in that movie, but I don't know if it works for the Iron Fist.
It doesn't stand out to me, honestly. It didn't bother me, and I didn't love it. So I just kind of washed over me. I'm sure it was effective as what it was intended to do, because again, it doesn't stick out in my mind. It was probably just enhancing what was there. But I didn't have a problem with it. But again, I couldn't. There was that one, the actual main theme of the show I could probably hum for you, but the rest of it, and obviously they use that motif all the time throughout the show. But I don't know, it's something I'll forget in a week and never remember again, and I think that's just kind of
which is so frustrating for a comic book. Like, that is the most iconic thing about, say, Superman the movie is the theme, right? Like that theme, it just sticks in your head, and and of course it's John Williams, so he's creating something that just is indelible to who that character is at that point. And to me, I feel like, if you're doing it right, comic book movies or TV shows should have that theme. I can think of, like on TV, I can think of the Flash theme. It has that kinetic energy. It has that kinetic energy to it, and
oh yeah.
I can think of that. I can think of the Arrow. I can't really think of Supergirl's as much because it's not as iconic. And honestly, Legends of Tomorrow, I can actually think of that before I can think of Supergirl. So that lets you know where, again, creating something that audibly represents the characters, I think is important. So I hope that they'll do that for the Defenders and really give them something kind of like the Avengers had that wonderful theme by Alan Silvestri, which is probably the most memorable theme of all the Marvel music. So speaking of Defenders, does this make you more or less excited for that show, or did it have any impact really for you?
It does make me more excited for Defenders. For a lot of reasons, because a lot of the show deals with elements from all of the shows. Like we mentioned, you see Madame Gao, you see Claire Temple, and who we didn't mention was Carrie-Anne Moss as Hogarth, who's in the show as well.
Yes, which I love her.
Yeah.
She was fantastic in this show.
She's great. I mean, she's great every time she shows up.
Yeah, I mean, she can do whatever she wants, and she's awesome.
Yeah, her and Claire have kind of the same appeal to me. Like they both cut through the BS that all of these people that they're dealing with.
Yeah, that's true.
They just don't care about it. They don't have time for it. I've got to do my job, and that's what's important. I don't care, But so for those reasons, because it's kind of a forward momentum already at this point, snowballing, and I am somewhat interested in, what is going to happen to Danny Rand, and we're not getting season 2 of Iron Fist before Defenders. So presumably we're going to get the follow-up to this story inside of Defenders. And that makes sense because it deals with the Hand. And that is kind of where they're going with this whole thing. That's, I assume, who they're going to be fighting in the Defenders. So it is actually, in a way, setting up for the Defenders as well. And you know what? If Danny Rand is going to be the weak link in this group of people that includes Daredevil, Jessica Jones, and Luke Cage, that's fine. I'm okay with that. If you're going to have somebody's always going to be the weak link, and if he's the weak link, that's fine. And I'm sure they'll find ways to. I hope they'll find ways to make him a little more interesting.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye. Yeah. No, I'm actually right there with you. I'm excited to see the Defenders because, I'm looking forward to seeing all the characters together. Maybe, hopefully, finally ending this hand threat. Because I'm tired of all these hands. It's just, I don't know. But yeah, no, this actually doesn't have an impact on my excitement level for the Defenders. It's more just, okay, that happened, and now I'm just ready to get to the main course at this point of seeing all of those characters together and what they've come up with for them. And yeah, we'll see where that goes.
One thing that we didn't mention, I just wanted to bring up real quick. And I don't know, you said you haven't read the comics already, and I haven't either, but I've looked up the history of the character. I believe, and they allude to this in the show, but they don't show it, which is my problem. He gets his power and that dragon tattoo from punching a dragon in the heart. I think is how it works. And they mention the dragon thing, but they do it as a joke and kind of in passing and then they get the glowing red eyes. But if that's like the origin story of your character and you don't show it, I mean, come on, that's kind of crazy. So I just wish they had actually shown that and gone totally off the walls. At this point, I mean, nothing should be off limits in the Marvel Universe, honestly.
Well, and especially since, you really have transcended into the superpower area. Like, this is a superpower.
Right.
It's not like, you were manufactured this way or something. And so I think that it would be great to actually see that.
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. And I think that's something that's so interesting to me about just these shows in general and Marvel on TV, because the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. really had a problem with this too, is embracing the comic bookiness. And that's one of the things that I've loved about the DC shows. You started off in an area that was a lot more realistic, quotes there, realistic, with Arrow, right? It's much more grounded, and you've kind of worked your way into the fantastical, right? But even Arrow, the moment you let in Flash, you start to have no problem with having superpowers and aliens and magic and all this stuff. Like, you just embrace the fact that this is your universe, and I feel like sometimes they are afraid to do that, even on it's like, we're comic book fans. We expect there to be fantastical, weird, crazy, off-the-wall things. It's okay, for that to be there. Like, just embrace who you are and be okay with it.
Right.
And I'm hoping that by the time we get to the Defenders here, that's really going to happen for the Marvel series, Netflix shows, that we just fully embrace the comic bookiness of it all. Because I don't mind the fact that they tend to be darker, grittier, more dour versions. That doesn't bother me at all. I love that stuff. But you can also do that and embrace comic bookiness at the same time. Yeah. It's not an either or. Mm-hmm. So I guess, man, if you have to rate this season, maybe out of 10, so we have a pretty good leeway. Where do you go with this, you think?
Oh, man, that's a great question. If it's,
that's why, I keep telling people, that's why I get paid nothing to ask the big questions.
Out of 10, I would give it a 5. Reluctantly, I'd say probably 5. I'd give it one
reluctantly fist. Crouched at the starting line.
1 fist out of 2, I guess. It isn't bad by any means. It's just frustrating and it doesn't have any clear goals, and but there's some good stuff in there. It's not like it's just sometimes you're going to be, okay, what's going on? What are we doing?
Yeah. No, I think calling it average is absolutely what it deserves. Yeah. It's legitimately an average show. And that's frustrating because, for the most part, we have seen the Marvel Netflix shows kind of transcend average for the most part, or at least be a little bit of above average. But I think this one is just right there. It's straight up, a little below average or average. And, it's funny. My wife said something to me, and she's like, she looked at me and she goes, we don't have any more Iron Fist episodes, do we? And I was like, no, it's over. She's like, isn't it kind of sad when you're kind of excited that you don't have a watch a show anymore? Like, and that's just kind of where she was coming from. And I understood what she was saying. It wasn't making me excited to come back every episode and want to continue watching it. And that's a little bit frustrating. And that shouldn't happen. When you have the opportunity, like we talked about earlier, to do whatever you want, to have no boundaries. You don't even have to have an episode limit. Your only episode limit should be your story structure. You should be creating just outlandish, amazing television. But it's just it wasn't happening. So yeah, I'm still looking forward to the Defenders, and like you said, there were some cool things in here. I'm glad I watched it just because I enjoyed the Colleen character. Mm-hmm. So, heck, if that's the only reason you watch it because you want to be introduced to a really kick-ass female character who is, I'm legitimately interested to see her back. Yeah, totally worth watching. And, of course, as we're moving to the Defenders, it's definitely worth watching at least once so you understand the story. So,
yeah. Absolutely.
Great to talk about here. Thank you so much to our associate producers through Patreon. We've got Ken Tripp and Davis Grayson. They have been supporting this show for so long, and it's meant the world to me. And they do that through patreon.com/TrekFM. It's a huge network that we have here on Trek FM, and there's just absolutely no way that we can make all that happen without the support of listeners just like you. And so go on over there to patreon.com. Every little bit helps every month. And so find out how you can support us. And, of course, we love to give back to you if you do in lots of different ways. So, again, check all that out at patreon.com/TrekFM. Daniel, great to have you back to talk some Marvel. I think we really covered everything. We were a little bit more critical than I would have wanted to be. I really wanted to like this show. As I do all of the shows that we talk about or movies, but I think we were constructive in our feedback, too.
I think so.
So where can everybody find you, though, if they want to talk some more Iron Fist or what else you're up to online?
Oh, I'm all over the place. You can find me at SETI Alpha 3 talking Star Trek. You can find me, if you are a gamer, on Z2Z if you're into Xbox gaming. And, of course, if you want to talk Iron Fist with me, which I would love to do, you can find me on Twitter. My handle there is 1UpDan. That's the number 1, not the word.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at MattRushing02. I'm also on Instagram at MRushing. You can find me here on the Trek FM network doing The Orb with Chris Jones, talking about Deep Space Nine. We hope to be back soon, so keep your fingers crossed that we'll be able to return. It all has to do with how Chris's recovery goes. So keep those thoughts and prayers coming for him. You can also find me here on the network with, as we said at the beginning, Star Wars The 602 Club Collection. That's its own special feed, and so you can check that out on iTunes. I am on the Nerd Party Network with John Mills. I mentioned him a few times. He is a genius. Make sure you check out our show, Aggressive Negotiations, where we talk about Star Wars each and every week. It's so much fun. We dive into the strangest little things, important things, silly things, you name it. We're talking about it over there. And then I'm also doing Owl Post, the Harry Potter podcast with Drea Kaufman. And we are walking through each and every chapter of Harry Potter, one chapter at a time. It's a blast. We are having so much fun. We're actually almost done with the first book, and we're looking forward to soon diving into the Chamber of Secrets. So I hope you'll check that out. Thank you so much for joining us, and y'all come back now, you hear?